Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and today I am joined with Flex Shane over here. All of his links are down below in the description. Do you have anything to say here, Shane?
No, just thanks for having me on the show. It's congratulations on over 3,000 subscribers already. You seem to be making a name of yourself in the Dynasty community and fantasy football community. So, I'm excited to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you very much for coming. As always, all of his links are down below in the description. Check them out. He is on a podcast called The Flex Network. It's very entertaining. I watch it pretty much every single week when I have the time to. When I'm making my videos, I just watch it right before. So the first guy we're going to be talking about here, there's going to be a bunch of videos talking about these college prospects coming into the NFL this season. The first guy we're going to be talking about here is Jonathan Taylor out of Wisconsin. Now, in his senior season, not his senior season, his junior season, I guess, because, they don't play all 4 years typically. So 13 games, 323 touches, 299 rushes, 1,909 rush yards, 21 rushing touchdowns, which is pretty high. 35 targets, 24 catches, 209 receiving yards, 5 receiving touchdowns, 69% receiving rate. And then he had 2,000 total yards, which is mostly what I want to bring up. That's just amazing. And he only had 5 fumbles, which is very, very good. So the first question I have to ask you about Jonathan Taylor is, what do you look at when talking about receiving value? Do you think that catches in college are very important? Because you see some guys go to the NFL, they catch the ball like a couple of times in college, and then the NFL, they're just a target monster. So how does that translate?
Well, in terms of translating, I guess to take a step back, in terms of Jonathan Taylor, if you look at all of his metrics, you just rattled them off, is pretty much like a stat. If you're a stat guy, he checks up pretty much every box. And if you're a film guy, you like to go watch him, and he checks all those boxes as well. So one of the criticisms that a guy like Jonathan Taylor has had is that maybe he's not as efficient or as electric in the passing game, simply because at Wisconsin, they didn't really use him as often in the passing game as, say, a guy like DeAndre Swift or Cam Akers, who I know you love. So obviously it's important. I think most leagues nowadays are at least 0.5 PPR, with more going towards like the full PPR. Mm-hmm. So it's obviously important, but with a guy like Jonathan Taylor, he may not have been used from an actual percentage basis, but he still had close to the same number of catches as everybody else. He still had 24 catches with 209 reception yards and 5 reception touchdowns. So obviously it's going to translate it, but then you kind of look at a guy like a Derrick Henry, right? Who on our show, we actually had his high school coach that we interviewed. He actually, with one of the guys, Al, who we call Season Long Says, he actually is a teacher in the same district as the Derrick Henry high school coach. So we asked him point blank, like, can Derrick Henry catch the ball? And he didn't really catch the ball. In college, he didn't really ever get thrown the ball. But what you saw is that Tennessee, with like screenplays and that sort of thing, found ways to get him involved this year, and it helped him get to that next level. So when you're talking about a running back that, like a Derrick Henry or like a Jonathan Taylor, that are kind of these tanks that don't necessarily catch the ball a ton in college, it doesn't necessarily mean it won't translate to the NFL or to the pro game. It's just a matter of, are they going to be used? And I think what's kind of exciting with the NFL and the way the direction it is going is that a lot of these coaches, like there's this new regime without these old crusty coaches, and now a lot of the younger, kind of sexier, like Matt Rule and even like a Sean McVay, right? Where these guys know how to get their playmakers the ball. And if a guy like Jonathan Taylor, who has shown he can catch the ball when he needs to, if they're going to involve him in the pass game, it's just that next level. But from a fantasy perspective, it basically makes a difference between a first round running back versus like a third round running back.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, Jonathan Taylor, if you're in like a rookie league, you're probably going to draft, not a rookie league, I should say, Dynasty league, you're going to draft him in like the first round if they're included in the regular Dynasty pool. Like if it's like your startup draft, would you draft him in the first round?
First round, that's what's tough is, like, right now there are a lot of these startup leagues, and one of my favorite parts, and I think you'd agree, like one of the most fun parts of any league is the draft, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's the startup draft, whether it's the rookie draft. So if I was drafting, it would probably fall somewhere in rounds 1 or 2. Again, assuming no super flex, just a kind of a standard one quarterback type league. You're probably going to be going around the end of the first round or second round. But the thing about where he's going to fall is like any of these players, even a guy as electric as Jonathan Taylor, it is going to be landing spot dependent. So if he goes to a team, say like a Seattle, or I mean, listen, if he goes to like Kansas City with the 32nd overall pick, like pretty much anybody who follows fantasy football is going to be just like falling off their chairs, screaming with excitement. I don't know if that's going to happen because they do have Damian Williams, but so in a situation like that, then yeah, I would almost argue Jonathan Taylor is going to be like a first round pick in some of these startup dynasty drafts. But sight unseen, probably I would say middle to late second round.
Okay, that makes sense because I've been doing a lot of super flex mocks. He goes around like the second or third round, but super flex completely sways the draft because there's going to be like 9 quarterbacks going in the first 2 rounds. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So Jonathan Taylor, you said Derrick Henry. Do you think that's his best comp for the NFL, or do you think it's someone different?
Well, a site that you and I both like to use is playerprofiler.com, and they have him best comparable to actually Ezekiel Elliott.
Okay.
And I mean, Ezekiel Elliott, Derrick Henry, like Derrick Henry is what you'd call an outlier. So there aren't too many guys that would actually compare to him. Like this year in the draft, A.J. Dillon, I would argue, is probably similar to a guy like Derrick Henry. But Jonathan Taylor, I mean, he is 226 pounds, 5'10". So he definitely profiles a little bit smaller relative to a monster. Let's just call it what it is, a monster like Derrick Henry. But I think that the comp is to Ezekiel Elliott is probably pretty close. So I would, and if you kind of go down the list with his top 4 or 5, it's Zeke Elliott, Trent Richardson, Robert Turbin, Ryan Matthews, Bernard Pierce to go down the list. But Zeke, I mean, do you remember a couple years ago when Zeke came out and when he got drafted to Dallas with one of those top offensive lines, people were like immediately in season-long leagues, he was going like in the late first round.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing, like if Jonathan Taylor falls in the right situation, that's where he's going to be. Right now, I don't know if you do best balls at all, but right now he's falling right around the early third round in best ball picks. So I guarantee you if he falls in the right position, he's going to skyrocket because the fact that he looks like Zeke, again, he's got both all the measurables. I mean, he destroyed the combine, and the fact that he's showing it on the field. I think that a guy like Zeke who's done that as well is probably a pretty good comparison.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people, when they're talking about Jonathan Taylor, bring up how he doesn't have a lot of tread left on the tires. He runs the ball a million times every single year. Does that really come into be a factor for you? Because he's never once gotten really hurt. He's not one of those guys that gets the ball a million times and then just breaks his leg like other people, like Dalvin Cook, let's say. So
like a Dalvin Cook. Yeah, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. It's not necessarily usage. I want to say that in the NFL, that 3,000 touch mark is what we kind of look at in terms of when we start to see typically a running back decline. But I don't know if it's a good comparison for a guy like Jonathan Taylor simply because he's showing it, right? To your point, he has not had any major injuries. And he was actually asked about it at the Combine because I think that's going to be a common concern. And honestly, from a fantasy perspective, I feel like people are nitpicking, right? If they're going to say, well, this guy's going to break down faster. Well, okay, maybe he's only good until his age 26 season, but the dude's only 21 years old. So he's going to have 5 years. If he had a lot of injuries and he had a huge laundry list of injury history, yeah, absolutely would be concerning. But the fact that he has not been injured, it basically gave him the opportunity to accrue all of those stats, right? Because if he was injured and he wasn't playing in those games, he wouldn't have the stats. So I have no issues. I mean, for me, he's the 101 in rookie drafts.
Yeah.
That doesn't concern me at all.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, obviously, the Combine happened like a month ago, and that's, to me, the Combine isn't super important, but how do you weigh the Combine? Like, when a guy runs as fast as Jonathan Taylor, some people didn't expect him to run that fast. I mean, I did personally because I really liked him. He was the guy I want the Dolphins to draft. I'm a Dolphins fan. I mean, I doubt they will, but...
Oh, God, okay.
Yeah, I know you're a Patriots fan, but what do you think about the Combine? Do you weigh that in?
Well, I mean, you have to, right? I mean, when we look at the fact and you compare him to, say, a J.K. Dobbins who didn't actually really test at the Combine, it just creates question marks. Yeah. But I think that you can't – listen, so when you're ranking these running backs or even these wide receivers pre-Combine, you're going off of a lot of his game tape or just the general accounting stats you would find – just with their college performance. And then they go to the Combine and it's almost like a validation It's okay. Jonathan Taylor looks fast. Is he
Uh-huh.
actually fast? Oh yeah, he ran a, what is it here? So I'm just pulling up his 40 yard. It's 4.39. So under a 4.440.
Hmm.
That's extremely quick.
Yeah.
And then when you translate it for his height and weight, he's pretty much like a 90th plus percentile speed score. So this is a guy who he looked like he was fast, and guess what? He proved that he was fast. So
Yeah.
I would say that it's more of a validation. And when a guy doesn't test or test poorly, aka like a Zach Moss, who pre-combine he was in the discussion of like the top 4 or 5 running
Yeah.
backs, depending on who you preferred, whatever your flavor was. But he tested very poorly at the combine. So typically, it's going to hurt you if you test poorly more than it really helps you. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, 100%. I argued that Zach Moss, he wasn't even hurt. His heart was just hurt after he performed so bad. But I think that the
Yeah.
combine, you have to like partially weigh it in. But to me, it's not everything because if you watch like some of these guys run, they just run way faster with the ball in their hands. I know people talk about that on Twitter. It's like a joke, but it is kind of true. Some of those guys do run faster in like full game speed, if you get what I'm saying. But I think that
Of course.
Jonathan Taylor was very, very good in college. And I think that he's probably going to be the 101, unless you're talking super flex, in probably every single dynasty draft. Unless he somehow goes to some garbage team, like a terrible landing spot would be like some team who just has like no offensive line, or he's going to be like the second back on the team. But I think the team that draft Jonathan Taylor is really going to try to put him to be like the main back on the team. Do you think that's true as well?
Well, I mean, the thing about like Jonathan Taylor is he's probably going to be drafted in either the late first round or early second round.
Uh-huh.
So if a team is investing that sort of draft capital on him, yeah, they're drafting him to be the RB1 for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. That makes a
So
lot
I
of
would say, yeah, I mean, yeah, of course.
sense. Do you think that Jonathan Taylor is going to I don't know how to like word this, but do you think that he is going to be the guy that everyone believes he will be? Because a lot of these guys get so much hype and then they just don't perform. Like you could see over the past couple of years, like Darrell Henderson. I know you brought him up. Everyone loved
Yeah.
Darrell Henderson in fantasy drafts, and then he busted. But to me, I think that that's like nearly impossible because if you're drafting a guy early in drafts, like if you remember a couple of years ago, Saquon in regular
Yes.
redraft leagues, he was getting drafted. He was like a top 3 pick and no one's even
Yeah.
seen him touch the NFL field. But my only worry now is this is actually something that I think is important is now with this coronavirus shit, do you think that this impacts the rookies a lot because they're not going to be seeing potentially OTAs, training camp, things like that?
Yes. The short answer is yes, but I think it affects different positions differently.
Mm-hmm.
So generally, like my strategy, I guess to take a step back, when I'm drafting my dynasty rookie picks, I tend to favor the running back over the wide receiver position. So
Yeah.
for example, like I would argue like a CD Lamb is probably he's my wide receiver one. I think he's a lot of people's wide receiver one on their boards as well.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to be considering a guy like, well, I'm definitely going to be taking like a Cam Akers or J.K. Dobbins ahead of CD Lamb,
Mm-hmm.
because when you talk about dynasty, drafting one of those like high-end running backs is like an immediate jolt to the system. It will immediately make your dynasty team better because they will have impact right at the very start. You see that these rookie running backs, given the opportunity, they can be effective and they can have impact in real NFL football immediately in
Yeah.
your first year. Whereas oftentimes there's a little bit of a lag for these wide receivers. So when it comes to the running back position, yes, it could hurt, and I would say it would hurt more so from a strength and conditioning perspective. I would be willing to bet that if there is a delay in the preseason or just in general with the whole off-season timing, then
Mm-hmm.
we're probably going to see more injuries in training camps.
Yeah.
So that to that end, yes, there's a little bit more risk associated with that. But in terms of the direct impact on the field for a running back, it doesn't really worry me. If they're drafted early and this NFL team believes in them, I would believe in them. Now, we see it with wide receivers that more often than not, you don't see an immediate impact. I mean,
Yeah.
you see guys like Deebo Samuel, who he finally started coming on last year, but it wasn't late until the season. And then
Mm-hmm.
now, year 2, even with an A.J. Brown, who again went off, DK Metcalf. I mean, the list goes on in terms of guys who, it takes time to develop that rapport with their quarterback, develop the trust with the coaching staff to be put on the field. So I could absolutely see it affecting the wide receivers more than the running backs.
Okay, yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. I'd definitely be worried about when you're drafting a wide receiver now just for this
Mm-hmm.
year, like the rookie, because at the end of the day, like even last year, we saw Terry McLaurin and Dwayne Haskins. They played college football together, and somehow he had no idea how to throw the ball to Terry McLaurin. It was like embarrassing. The ball was going
Oh
like
my
100
God.
feet over his head. I don't think Dwayne Haskins is any good. That has nothing to do with this video. But do you got anything else on JT before we end here?
God, we can do total tangents. I like Dwayne Haskins coming into school, to be honest.
You do?
He had really good just I guess football IQ would be the best way to put it, but it didn't really translate onto the field. But that may be a conversation for another day. I think that Washington's probably going to take a QB, to be
Oh,
honest.
geez. I hope not. I want Tua for the Dolphins, but
Oh God, you guys are gonna have to trade up because what do the Dolphins have? The fifth pick? Is it 5?
yeah, they have to move up.
Yeah, they're gonna have to move up, I think.
Yeah, probably. If they don't move up and they go with Herbert, I'm going to throw something at a screen because I can't stand Herbert.
Don't you feel like Herbert's kind of underrated though?
He is underrated, but I mean, his arm skill is amazing.
Yeah, the biggest criticisms that I've heard about Justin Herbert is that it's between the ears. It's when the bullets are flying and he's on the field, his ability to adjust to the in-game speed, it's just not quite there. Like he's like the best practice quarterback that you could ever want, but he's not necessarily the best game quarterback.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you got anything else here on Jonathan Taylor before we end the video?
I think the only thing about to close out the Jonathan Taylor is don't overthink this, people. I mean, he's the best running back in the class. He destroyed the combine. He racked up 3 years of production. He's an athletic freak, and pretty much unless he goes to an absolute disaster situation, which I don't think is going to happen, he's going to have an immediate impact in year one. So he's a 101 in my book.
Yeah, I completely agree. So thank you for coming on here. We're going to end this episode here. Make sure to check out Shane. His links are down below in the description. Make sure to watch their podcast. It is very good. I watch it. It's on YouTube. It's on Spotify. It's on all those things where you can watch podcasts. Mine's on there as well. So thank you guys all for watching. Shane, you got anything else to say here?
No, cheers. Just appreciate you having me on, brother.
All right. Thank you guys very much. There will be more of these kind of videos breaking down these rookies across the next week. So thank you all for watching. I love you all. Goodbye.